Spring practice is over, so are the transfer edge rushers all they were hyped to be? Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So we're going through a series here on Locked on LSU, recapping spring and some of the big storylines. In case you missed a couple of episodes ago, we went through Caleb Jackson's decision to return to LSU. I would highly recommend you go check that out if you missed it. We also talked about the LSU offensive line, the single biggest question mark on this entire team, replacing 4 starters and 170 career games played. They've got the opposite issue at defensive end or edge rusher. LSU wasn't productive there. Returning, I should say. Braden Swinson was very good, and as was Dashawn Womack for LSU. Swinson had 8.5 sacks, 13 TFLs. Savion Jones, 4.5 sacks, 7.5 TFLs. And those two guys are out of eligibility and they're off to the NFL. And we've looked at that group and said, okay, well, are there guys like on the offensive line where you've got these dudes, these 5 stars, locked, loaded, ready to go, stepping up, ready to finally take their spot, but they brought in some transfers as well at key spots. On the defensive line, you can't say that because you lose Savion Jones, you lose Braden Swinson. What do you have returning? Well, you got Gabe Relaford, and I'm very excited about Gabe Relaford going into year 3. Physically, he is transformed his body and is transforming his body into something that looks like an SEC defensive end and a guy that's primed to be really good. But Gabe Relaford, a season ago, had 1 TFL and a half a sack. As far as your returning edge rushers, that's it. That's the extent of the production. Whit Weeks is back. 10 TFLs, 3.5 sacks, but he's a linebacker. Dom McKinley had 3 sacks, but he's a defensive tackle. Devon Keys had 1.5 sacks. He's a linebacker. Dashawn Womack, he's gone. He's now at Ole Miss. Gio Paez gone. Sage Ryan gone. Paris Shan, JVR Suggs gone. Major Burns gone. They're all gone. That's it. Now Harold Perkins is back, but again, he's going to play the star position. I'm talking about edge rushers. That's the extent of your returning production. Gabe Relaford, 1 TFL, 1 half sack. So the charge for LSU, the necessity was go in the transfer portal and don't just get bodies at defensive end or edge rusher. Go get dudes. And boy, did they ever. You know, we can be really excited about the receivers LSU added. We can be excited about Bauer Sharp at tight end. And I think there was real positions of need where they added key players. Braylon Moore at center, Tamarcus Cooley at safety. These were guys they needed to add. Mansour Delane at cornerback. No doubt. Spots where they could use an upgrade, and you went and upgraded at those spots. But a place where you had no experience, no returning production, a spot where you had to go get better in a hurry, and my goodness, did they ever, was at edge rusher. Remember I told you Gabe Relaford had 1 TFL and a half a sack a year ago. You went and added Jack Pyburn, who at Florida played in 29 career games with 9 starts. He had 5 TFLs, 1 sack. By his own admission on this show, he told us he is an effective pass rusher. He is not an elite pass rusher, which is why he wanted to come to a defense that would allow him to be. Jamari Butler at Nebraska, 17 TFLs, 7.5 sacks. And the cherry on top, the cherry on top, Patrick Payton, 31 and a half career TFLs, 16 career sacks, a total terror off the edge. For context, if you look at LSU's entire team a year ago, they had 34 sacks. Patrick Payton has half that number himself in his career at Florida State. So you went and added total dudes. So the question now becomes, okay, you're very high on guys like Gabe Relaford, Kalaj Cobbins, Dylan Carpenter, even some of the freshmen you have coming in that very highly regarded, that we're excited to see what they're going to develop into their career. But Brian Kelly and his staff looked at this team and went, we're not looking at 2025 as a developmental year. That was 2022. Took our lumps. This is a go contend for a national championship year. And so they had to add experienced dudes at positions where you didn't have them. And defensive end was certainly one of those spots. So how do you integrate these new edge rushers that are so veteran and continue to grow your young guys? Well, Gabe Relaford talked about building continuity with those players.
First and foremost, we were able to bond with each other, especially my position group, because we brought in 3 transfers, and I feel like that was the biggest thing for us, is just bonding with each other, just matching each other's play styles, because it's new duos. So I feel like we did a great job with that.
So building styles, building continuities, Gabe Relaford went on.
They got here initially, everybody was on their toes. It's like, okay, they brought in 3 transfers, but they came in cool, man. Like, none of them have a crazy ego. I mean, it's probably the closest the edge group has been in a long time since our last group. Our last group, obviously, there'll never be nothing like it, but these guys, we're real close with each other. We hang out with each other outside of football, so I just feel as though that we're just going to keep that bond going, keep working with each other, and it's only going to get better.
It's so interesting when we were hearing a guy like Paul Mabenga talk about the offensive line and bringing in the transfers in that group all throughout spring. That offensive line was a turnstile, constantly rotating guys in and out. And the point he made was, we're all cheering for each other. Like, it's competition, but there's no angst or animus. Everybody wants to play, but everybody wants that unit to be better. And here on the defensive end spot, you're hearing the same thing. It's like LSU not only was going to look for dudes in the transfer portal that were going to be impacts, but also guys that could fit the mold of the culture that Brian Kelly has been trying to build since he arrived in Baton Rouge. And it sure sounds like that. You hear the tight ends talk about Bauer Sharp. Trey'Dez Green and Bauer Sharp have become great friends by their own admission. Same thing with Michael Van Buren with the quarterbacks. It's interesting because sometimes whenever in this portal era, you have the concept of these 1-year mercenaries, right? The guys coming to take a check, coming in, play a year, and then they're gone. And that can be a difficult thing to assimilate. But so far, anyway, all the players are saying the right things. We'll see what this offseason looks like, because now you go from spring until they report for fall camp at the beginning of August, and the only ones with access are the strength staff. So a lot of these guys are going to be on their own for a while, and we'll see how well they assimilate. But I will say, one of the most impressive things, or maybe one of the most important things to note about these transfers, especially the guys like Pyburn and Payton and Butler, yes, they're getting a healthy NIL deal to be at LSU. That's undeniable. The money's part of it. That's part of it with every one of these transfers. But it's also important to note what these guys have on the line. They came to a spot where they could, yes, they were going to make money, but where they wanted to win. And they know this is almost like a free agent year in the NFL. Like, it's your money year. You have to go play well, because this is your opportunity to go get drafted high and make a ton of money at the next level. So it's almost like this, there isn't time for all the other ancillary things, the nonsense. These guys are here to work and to get better, to win, and to go on to the next level and become a high draft pick and make a lot of money. But Gabe Relaford is a guy that I think we should all be really excited about. A Louisiana guy from Evangel Christian who came to LSU splashed a little as a freshman. Obviously, a year ago was behind some really good players at that edge group, like we talked about with Braden Swinson and Savion Jones and Paris Shand and Dashawn Womack, who was a former 5-star who's now at Ole Miss. But Relaford's the next guy who, part of Brian Kelly's recruiting class is developing, ready to step up. And he talked about the goals he has for the summer.
I'm just going to get back in the lab, of course, keep working on my body composition as far as my lean mass and how lean I am and all that. But it's really my lower body flexibility as far as being in my hips and my ankle flexibility, just being able to get into good positions to have as much power as possible to execute each play.
Blake Baker always talks about havoc rate. So the thing he wants to create is havoc. So you see a lot of odd fronts as well. Remember, we talked about a year ago, you'd see Savion Jones, Paris Shand kick inside, and you put Dashawn Womack on the edge along with Braden Swinson to get as many edge rushers on the field as possible when he's ready to create one of those havoc plays. It could be one of those things where you see those 4 guys, the 3 transfers in Relaford, have a pretty free-flowing rotation and different, odd looks up front. So whenever they get into fall camp and Blake Baker has an opportunity to, if I could steal a line from Gabe Relaford, get into the lab, be fascinating to see how that group looks. But saying all the right things and a lot of talent in that spot where you desperately needed an infusion and you've got it, and that transition seems to have assimilated pretty seamlessly so far. The other spot that's massively important is at safety, which was the biggest liability on this defense in 2024. Dashawn Spears is a guy going into his sophomore year, and he talked about how spring went, some of those transfers as well. You'll hear that as we continue. Locked on LSU, your team every day. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I love Gametime. The last-minute deals, like we mentioned, can save you up to 60% on last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. But my favorite feature is the all-in pricing. We've all been there before on one of those ticketing apps where you think you're paying a certain price. By the time you get to checkout, there's all these fees. You're paying a completely different price. Not with Gametime. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. There's no other way to say it, but safety was your greatest defensive liability in 2024. Despite not having elite talent and losing a big defensive player like Jacobian Guillory, the interior of the defensive line played well. We already talked about Savion Jones and Braden Swinson at the end, Paris Shand, Gio Paez. Those guys along the front played well. And you got contributions from Ahmad Bro and Dominic McKinley, some young players. At the second level, Whit Weeks played like an All-American for the bulk of the season. Losing Harold Perkins was not easy, but Greg Penn was a senior wearing the number 18 and was a tackling machine for LSU a season ago. So you look at that safety spot and you realize, man, that was your greatest liability. If I look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, and we've done this exercise, so our everydayers have heard me say this before, but if you look at the defensive grade for LSU, every defensive player from a season ago, Sage Ryan, who played safety for you, graded out at a 69.9. He was the highest among the safeties. But boy, you have a big drop off after that. Kylan Jackson, who only played 50 snaps on the season, was at a 66. If you keep going down, Dashawn Spears, who played 205 defensive snaps, graded out at a 61. And maybe one of the biggest liabilities on the team, unfortunately. You could even look further with the seldom used guys. Austin Osbury was a 60. Javen Toviano was a 57.8. Major Burns was a 57.7. Jordan Gilbert, a 53.2. Safety was your worst position. Now, I've continued to say this over and over, and in fairness, Jordan Gilbert was playing with one arm. He separated his shoulder. He battled it all year. He had off-season surgery, so he missed spring. Let's see what a healthy Jordan Gilbert looks like. But Sage Ryan, who was your highest-rated defensive back last year, outside of Zy Alexander, among the safeties, I should say. Sage Ryan's now at Ole Miss. He wasn't great, but he finally played in his natural position at safety, and he had his best season. Now he's at Ole Miss. Okay. Sage Ryan's gone. Major Burns has gone to graduation. Gilbert's coming back, but you have some young guys like Toviano, who's now settling in at safety. You've got Dashawn Spears, who's now going into his second season. Of course, you brought in Tamarcus Cooley as well from NC State, who is very likely a day one plug-and-play starter. Spears, though, is an interesting one because by some recruiting services, Dashawn Spears was a 5-star when he came to LSU. And he was a guy that when we looked at him last fall camp, I made the proclamation that that's a guy that could have the same trajectory as Eric Reed, a guy that's a rotational player, special teams early, but by the end of his freshman season, in a position group that could struggle, could end up being a starter. That's what happened with Eric Reed back in his freshman season in 2010. By the time he got to November, he was the starter, never relinquished the spot. Now, it didn't exactly go that way for Dashawn Spears. He had some highs. And listen, late in the opener against USC, when you had an ejection, he ends up having to go in and play the duration of the game while USC is trying to go for a game-winning drive in his first game ever as a freshman at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. So it was a big-time learning experience for Dashawn Spears as a freshman and a guy who has the physical ability to be a great safety. It's just about the learning curve. And here's what he talked about he learned as a freshman.
I probably just learned to take it step by step and have individual development throughout that season. So I think that's a key factor when becoming a freshman.
Trying to grow and develop individually, but then also talked about playing under Blake Baker for a second year.
I think he's done a good job as a coach, especially as his second year here, teaching the guys, just taking it step by step, honestly, and making everything slow down, especially for the younger guys. Especially myself as well as a second-year guy.
Remember, I told you all the Pro Football Focus grades for the safeties. And when I'm rattling off numbers in the 50s, right, keep that in mind when I tell you this. Tamarcus Cooley, who you brought in from NC State, his overall defensive grade was a 79.5. He played 620 snaps for NC State. His coverage grade was an 80. Safety by Pro Football Focus. Sage Ryan's defensive grade was a 69.9, 10 points low. Your highest graded safety was 10 points lower than Tamarcus Cooley, who's being brought in as a transfer. Listen, all throughout spring, we saw Brian Kelly rotate at the safety positions with the ones. We saw Tamarcus Cooley back there. We saw Dashawn Spears back there. Javen Toviano, who's settled in at safety after moving from corner and star. Now he's playing safety. We even saw Joel Rogers, who just finished up his freshman season at LSU, taking some reps with the ones. Remember, Jordan Gilbert wasn't participating, but how that safety group plays out is certainly going to be one to watch. One thing that seems undeniable is Tamarcus Cooley is going to be one of your starters. You brought him in to be that. The question is, who's going to start at the other safety spot? Is it going to be Dashawn Spears? Is it going to be Toviano finally finding a home at one position? Can a young guy like Joel Rogers step up, or does Jordan Gilbert, a veteran, win that job? The odds-on favorite would be Cooley and Jordan Gilbert to be your two starters, your veterans. But developing a rotation there with someone like Spears and Toviano it could be paramount for this defense having success because you're not going to do it with just two. So the development we'll watch for from Dashawn Spears in year two is going to be a very significant underlying story. But you were a liability at safety a year ago. Brian Kelly talked about it, throughout the course of the season. at how much they struggled at that safety spot and trying to find guys that were that could tackle, that could play with leverage, that were assignment sound, and you just didn't have it. Well, that's why you went and got Cooley. Similar to like we talked about with the defensive end. You had to get someone that can give you an immediate upgrade there. And you got him. Now, who wins the other job? It could very well be Dashawn Spears. This offseason will be big for him as he goes into his sophomore year trying to win a starting job. Okay, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. One quick break, and we'll put a button on today's show with a thumbnail preview of LSU Northwestern State at the box as the Tigers return home for a midweek game. Don't you move. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first-inning runs, PrizePicks keeps every game exciting. So it's fast and simple. Setting up a lineup takes less than 60 seconds. And when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Baseball Tigers are back at Alex Box Stadium on Tuesday night as they host Northwestern State for another midweek contest. And this LSU team has been good, has yet to lose one of their midweek contests so far this year. And they welcome in Northwestern State, which is 24-17 on the season. A little bit about Northwestern State, then I'll tell you what I'll be looking for from LSU in this game. So the Demons are 24-17. They're 15-9 in the Southland and won 2 of 3 over Lamar this past weekend in a home series in Natchitoches. So Rocco Gump is it's his name, is their leading hitter at 341 with 8 doubles, 4 triples, 5 homers, and 37 RBI. And infielder Daniel Burraway leads Northwestern State with 11 homers. So this is a team that has struggled offensively, hitting only 268 as a team, but they've been able to get it done on the mound with a 4.77 cumulative ERA. They've struck out 308 and 350 innings pitched and held opponents to a 258 opponent batting average. But you got to remember, while that may not be gaudy, sometimes you have to remember that they're going to load up their pre-conference against much tougher opponents. So sometimes it can get those stats sort of out of whack until you get into conference play. And obviously, as we've seen, they're doing really well in conference so far at 15-9 overall. So, they did play a series at a ranked Troy opponent. They played on the road at Southeastern. So they played UL, and they played Tulane. And again, they're going to play LSU here this weekend. So just something worth filing away about Northwestern State. But the midweek games are always far less about the opponent and more about LSU getting the work done. So this is a time in the season where we've seen a couple of things with LSU that maybe are a bit concerning that you'd love to see worked on. So this last weekend against Alabama, LSU, which strikes out among the fewest in the country, struck out 30 times in 3 games. So first and foremost, you want to cut down on the swing and miss. Let's see LSU put the ball in play. So watch to cut down the strikeouts. That's number one. Ben McDonald was a guest on my my radio show on Monday, and he called all 3 games of the Alabama series. And one of the things that Ben jotted down a note that he shared with us is that he looked up LSU's batting average with runners in scoring position over the weekend against Alabama, and it was in the 120s. I believe it was 125 was LSU's batting average with runners in scoring position. Just not good enough. When you get a runner in scoring position with less than 2 outs, you've got to execute offensively to get that run home. So offensively, if you're looking for a couple things, cut down on the strikeouts. When you get a runner in scoring position with less than 2 outs, you got to get them home. Those are 2 things very notably that you can watch on offense. Y'all know my feeling on this because I yelled about it after the game on Saturday. I think Jake Brown should be in the lineup every day. I'm not sure I believe that's going to happen. I don't know who Northwestern State's going to throw. If Jay Johnson wants to platoon lefty-righty, I don't know what he's going to do. But I think Jake Brown should be in the lineup every day. I would like to see him in the lineup against Northwestern State and every game heretofore. So that's something else that I'll be keeping an eye on. On the mound, that's probably where we're going to see more of the intrigue in this ballgame. Remember, you played a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, so you did have the extra day of rest. And then this weekend is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you have another day's rest built in there on the front end and the back end. So there really shouldn't be any limitations on your staff. Obviously, you're not going to go throw your best arms. You're not going to throw any of your starters, and you're not going to throw Cowan or Evans in this midweek game against Northwestern State, because midweek games don't matter. What matters is your weekend. You want to have your best guys ready. So who gets work? What will be really interesting to see is how they handle Connor Ware. So Connor Ware started on Saturday. He could give you something in this game on Tuesday and still be ready to go conceivably on Sunday if you need him for game 3 of the series to start. Or does Chase Shores go back into the rotation? I don't know. Most likely what will happen is William Schmidt will get the start for LSU in the midweek. And you want to see William Schmidt continue to pitch well and start to develop some consistency. So, it was one of those things where Schmidt was doing well in the midweek, and Jay Johnson made the sort of ill-fated comment now where he said he's probably done pitching on Tuesdays for the rest of his career here. And then we saw what happened. It just didn't go well once they got into conference play. And it's been a struggle for him to get back out there. He pitched against Texas, went a third of an inning, allowed a run on 2 hits. He walked 2, and we didn't see him in an SEC game again until this past weekend against Alabama, where he went 2/3 of an inning, allowed 2 runs, walked 3, threw 2 wild pitches. It's probably one of those things where William Schmidt is now where Cade Anderson was a year ago as a freshman. A really talented arm that is overwhelming midweek opponents, but is just not ready to consistently get SEC hitters out. So this is probably another opportunity to get William Schmidt out there, get him some mound time, and see if he can go deliver in this midweek opportunity to keep getting more innings, keep building more confidence. They're going to run him out there in SEC weekends and SEC games because they need him. And they need him to get more comfortable and be able to throw strikes against SEC opponents the way he does in the midweek. So you got to keep getting him more opportunities. So William Schmidt would be the one that I want to see on Tuesday against Northwestern State to get out there, have some success, and keep building some more confidence in his repertoire. LSU and Northwestern State Tuesday night out at Alec Box Stadium. One more preamble before LSU welcomes in Tennessee for a 3-game series. Tennessee, of course, lost a series at home this past weekend to Kentucky, a very talented Tennessee team, but one that has stubbed its toe here and there along the way. Big one this weekend with the Tigers and the Vols. But first, Northwestern State comes to the box on Tuesday night. Of course, we'll have a post-game show for you live as soon as that game goes final, so be sure to join us here. Hey, thanks so much for making it your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, how about you check out Locked On NFL Draft? As your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are on podcasts, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.